The Whispering Shadows by Tyler Morgan. I was only 7 years old when it happened. A memory that still haunts me to this day. My bedroom was unlike any other in our house. It occupied its own floor. An attachment to the attic, really. More of a closet-type room than a proper bedroom. The previous owners had used it as a playroom for their daughters. But for me, it became a sanctuary and a source of terror. The most striking feature was the enormous closet door. It connected directly to the attic. It's elevated and accessible only by a set of wooden stairs. A massive sliding door concealed its contents. Toys and childhood relics packed every inch of space inside. Being so young and isolated from my family, I often felt afraid in that room, especially with that looming closet always present. One night after watching a scary movie with my family, those fears intensified. As I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a toy falling over. Coming from inside the closet, pure panic gripped me. I bolted from my bed and ran to my parents' room. They assured me no one was there, but let me stay with them that night. Surely it was just your imagination, my mother soothed. The following evening, I had almost forgotten about the incident, until it happened again. This time the noise was louder, more distinct. Like an entire container of Legos spilling across the floor. Once more I fled to my parents. My father's patience was wearing thin, but he reluctantly allowed me to sleep in their room again. The next day my mother and I investigated the closet.
Alice.
To my horror, there it was. A pile of Legos scattered on the floor. The container tipped over nearby. My mother dismissed it as having simply fallen on its own. That night my father had reached his limit. He locked his bedroom door, told me to stop with the nonsense. I lay awake, paralyzed with fear, straining to hear any sound from the closet. The minutes crawled by like hours. Then it happened. The silence, shattered by the violent sliding of the closet door. Moonlight streaming through my window illuminated a figure standing there. A scream of pure terror erupted from my throat, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before or since. The figure leapt down and bolted out of my room. Out the front door of our house, my mother came running. My father chased after the intruder, but to no avail. The police never caught him. To this day I wonder, who was he? How long had he been living in our attic? And most chilling of all, what were his intentions that night? Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "He who believes in Allah and the last day should not harm his neighbor." Yet someone had violated the sanctity of our home, our trust, leaving scars that may never fully heal. The Phantom Pianist by Jordan Ellis. It was supposed to be an ordinary school trip, the Louisiana tour they called it. A journey through the significant historical sites of the South, but one stop would change everything. Myrtle's Plantation is known as one of the most haunted places in America, a place steeped in dark legends and ghostly tales. I never expected to experience one firsthand. Our group stood huddled in one of the plantation's many rooms. The tour guide droned on about some historical fact or another. I found my attention drifting. That's when I first heard it. Single piano key, struck with deliberate precision. I glanced around confused. No one else seemed to notice. Again it sounded clear as day. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to my friends. They looked at me like I was crazy. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the source. There wasn't even a piano in sight, yet the phantom notes continued. Soft but unmistakable. Chill ran down my spine as I realized I alone could hear them, or so I thought. That's when I noticed her. An older woman across the room. Our eyes met and she gestured to her ear. A silent question. I nodded, confirming what we both knew. We weren't imagining it. The tour guide's voice cut through my thoughts. He began recounting the tale of a soldier who had died in that very room. How guests often reported hearing him play the piano late at night. My blood ran cold. The keys continued their ethereal melody, a private concert for only 2 listeners. I exchanged a knowing glance with the woman. Her face mirrored my own mix of awe and fear. As we filed out of the room, I approached her. We spoke in hushed tones, comparing notes on what we had experienced. Her husband and son had heard nothing, just like my friends. What made us different? Why were we chosen to hear the ghostly performance? The Quran speaks of the unseen world, of realities beyond our comprehension, and they ask you about the soul. Say the soul is of the affair of my Lord. Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled. But one question lingers. If we could hear the soldiers' music, what else might be out there, just beyond the veil of our perception? The Midnight Encounter by Jason Carter. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind that makes you want to curl up with a good book and a warm drink. Instead, I found myself huddled around a campfire with friends, swapping ghost stories as Halloween approached. That's when Sarah spoke up, hesitant at first, warning us that her tale was true, one she rarely shared. But our curiosity got the better of us. We urged her on. She began recounting her parents' first date, an awkward yet pleasant affair that should have ended with a simple goodnight. But her father had other ideas. He suggested a midnight hike up Provo Canyon, a place he knew well from his rock climbing days. They drove to the canyon's mouth, stepping out into the inky blackness. Only starlight to guide their way. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, Sarah's father felt a growing unease. The path ahead disappeared beneath a canopy of trees, an impenetrable darkness. He pushed the feeling aside, pressing onward. But with each step, the sensation intensified, primal instinct screaming danger. Still he ignored it, until his foot connected with something soft, right in the middle of the trail. In the pitch black, it was impossible to discern what lay at his feet. The feeling of wrongness reached a fever pitch. Every fiber of his being screamed to run, to flee this cursed place. Without a word, he and Sarah's mother turned back, practically sprinting to the safety of their car. Never speaking of what transpired that night. Years passed. Sarah's parents, now married, watched a television interview. The subject, none other than the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy. The interviewer asked about his closest brush with capture. Bundy's response chilled them to the bone. He recounted a night in Provo Canyon, how he had just murdered a young woman when he heard footsteps approaching, barely managing to conceal himself and his victim, only to watch as a man walked right into the body and inexplicably turned away. As Sarah finished her story, a heavy silence fell over our group, the implications too horrific to contemplate. What if her father had investigated further that night? What gruesome discovery awaited in the darkness? And most chilling of all, what if Bundy had decided not to hide? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should either speak good or remain silent. But in the face of such evil, can silence ever truly be enough?" The Whispers in the Stacks by Emily Rhodes. The clock struck 11 p.m. as I hunched over my laptop in the library's basement. Known as the Stacks, this labyrinth of bookshelves was a last resort for procrastinators like myself. With an 8 a.m. deadline looming, I had no choice but to burn the midnight oil. The layout was simple enough. A main staircase led down to a long hallway. 4 entrances opened into 2 massive rooms filled with books and study desks. I'd been there for hours, my eyes strained in the dim light. The only other soul, a boy working a few desks away. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of turning pages. That's when I heard it. A rapid flipping sound, like someone rifling through a book at high speed. Irritation flared. Who would be so inconsiderate at this hour? I tried to ignore it, focus on my essay. But the noise persisted, growing louder with each passing minute. After what felt like an eternity, I'd had enough. Rising from my chair, I stalked towards the source of the disturbance. 3 steps in, and the sound abruptly ceased. An eerie quiet descended once more. Unnerved, I returned to my work. 10 minutes of blessed silence passed before it started again. This time the volume was deafening, as if someone were violently shaking the largest tome in existence. The boy at the other desk stood up, clearly as frustrated as I was. We began searching the stacks, weaving through the maze of shelves, the noise growing louder with each step. We converged on its origin, one on either side of a bookcase. But there was nothing there. We exchanged bewildered glances. How was this possible? We'd seen no one enter, and we were blocking the only exits. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. Spoken agreement passed between us as we retreated to our desks. Surely there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps some sort of ventilation system creating the noise. I forced myself to focus on my essay. Time was running out. We had barely settled back into our seats when it happened. The flipping sound exploded right next to the boy's chair. grabbed his belongings and bolted, pausing only long enough to lock eyes with me, a look of pure terror on his face. I was right behind him, S.A.B. damned. As we fled up the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching our retreat. The Quran warns, and do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. But some knowledge once gained can never be unlearned. What malevolent force haunts those stacks? Why did it choose to reveal itself to us that night? The Stranger at Sea, by William Reed. The gentle rocking of our fishing boat had always been a source of comfort, a reminder of simpler times. It's just me and my wife Sarah against the vast expanse of the North Atlantic. But that night, everything changed. Our 2-day excursion started normally enough, a decent catch. Evenings spent playing cards and listening to music. It wasn't until the second night that the horror began. We sat in the cabin engrossed in our nightly card game. The only sound the lapping of waves against the hull. Then we heard it. The unmistakable rumble of a boat motor piercing the darkness. Exchanging worried glances, we rushed outside. There, illuminated by our deck light, was a man, middle-aged with a scraggly beard and baseball cap, piloting a decrepit motorboat without a single light. I approached cautiously, asked if he needed assistance. His request for gasoline seemed odd, especially when he claimed to have plenty after I offered a ride to shore. An uncomfortable silence fell between us, his blank stare unnerving in the dim light. When he finally spoke again, it was to inquire about our catch. I answered politely, despite growing unease. My question about navigating in such darkness met with only a chuckle, as if I'd made some private joke. With a final "nice meeting you folks," he turned and vanished into the inky blackness. Sarah voiced her fears of a potential robbery. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The encounter defied all logic. Why approach so late, so far from shore, alone in that tiny boat? My instinct screamed danger. We doused our lights and sailed north, hoping to put distance between us and the strange visitor. Hours later, I awoke to Sarah's blood-curdling scream. There at the foot of our bed stood a figure, wetted in the darkness. I lunged forward, but he was already gone. The sound of that cursed motorboat fading into the night. We sailed straight for shore, reported the incident immediately. But of course nothing ever came of it. To this day, the questions haunt me. What did he want? What were his intentions that night? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "None of you will have faith till he wishes for his brother what he likes for himself. But what of those who wish only harm, who violate the sanctity of hearth and home?" As I lay awake each night, I can't help but wonder, is he still out there, prowling the waters in search of his next victims? The Dark Corner, by Sarah Mitchell. I was in my 4th year of high school, struggling to fall asleep one night. You know that unsettling feeling of being watched? It was overwhelming. An intense sensation of malicious intent bore into me. I couldn't shake it no matter how hard I tried. My eyes snapped open, drawn to the darkest corner of my room. Alcove. Across from my bed remained pitch black due to the closet blocking any light. On that inky void I saw a hazy, darker outline. Goosebumps erupted across my skin. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing sleep to come, but that evil stare persisted. My heart raced as adrenaline flooded my system. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Seek refuge with Allah from the evil of that which he has created." I silently recited the prayer, hoping for protection. A sudden creak pierced the silence, the unmistakable sound of weight on the floorboards. My eyes flew open in terror. The shadow had moved. It now loomed in the opposite corner of the room. Panic seized me as my mind reeled. Every instinct screamed danger. I yanked my pillow and blanket over my head, sobbing quietly. "Please don't come closer," I begged silently. Tears soaked my pillow as I cried myself into an uneasy sleep. I know with absolute certainty this was no dream or figment of my imagination. To this day, recalling that night sends icy chills down my spine. What was that malevolent presence? Why did it fixate on me? The Quran states, "And from the evil of the darkness when it settles." Perhaps some things are better left in the shadows, but the memory lingers, haunting the dark corners of my mind. The Zipper in the Night, by Eric Dawson. It was our first family camping trip. At 18, I was actually excited despite my initial reluctance. We drove deep into the countryside, eschewing designated campsites. My dad parked on a quiet road and we hiked a mile into the woods. A small clearing became our home for the night. We pitched 2 tents, one for my 11-year-old twin siblings, and me, another for my parents. As night fell, I tossed and turned, unable to get comfortable. The sleeping bag felt like lying on bare ground. Hours passed as I shifted restlessly. My brother and sister had long since drifted off. A faint sound caught my attention. The slow rasp of the tent zipper being lowered. My pulse quickened as I peered into the darkness. A shadowy figure poked their head inside. "Dad," I whispered hesitantly. The intruder withdrew quickly, leaving the tent unzipped. Confusion and unease washed over me. Surely it was just my parents checking on us. I crawled out, calling Dad. Louder, but the figure had vanished. Shaken, I made my way to my parents' tent. I unzipped it and shook my father awake, asking if he'd just looked in on us. His drowsy negative response sent chills down my spine. I woke my mother, hoping desperately it had been her. But she too denied leaving their tent. The horrifying realization hit me. A stranger had opened our tent and peered inside. My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Who was out there in the darkness? What were their intentions? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said he who believes in Allah and the last day should be hospitable to his guest. But this was no welcome visitor. Sleep eluded me that night as I lay rigid with fear. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs amplified in my hyper-alert state. What if they came back? The long hours until dawn stretched endlessly. Even as sunlight filtered through the trees, I couldn't shake the dread that clung to me. Who was the mysterious figure? And why did they target our tent that night? The Vanishing Painter, by Rachel Monroe. My parents' honeymoon in Key West took an unsettling turn from the moment they arrived. The non-smoking room they were assigned wouldn't do for my cigarette-loving father. Quick request at the front desk secured them a different room. Little did they know the strangeness that awaited them. As the elevator doors opened on their floor, an overwhelming smell of fresh paint assaulted their senses. A painter stood halfway down the hallway, his supplies scattered around him as he worked. My parents greeted him casually as they passed. The man gave no acknowledgement, continuing his task as if they weren't there. Inside their room, the paint fumes were unbearable. Frustrated, they decided to change rooms yet again. At the front desk, they explained the situation. Attendants' confused expression set off alarm bells. There was no scheduled painting on that floor. Still, she agreed to move them once more. My parents returned to gather their luggage. But in the span of 10 minutes, everything had changed. The painter, his supplies, the overwhelming smell. All had vanished without a trace. An eerie stillness permeated the previously chaotic hallway. Unnerved, they hurried to their new room, trying to rationalize the inexplicable events. The next morning, they overheard a tour guide speaking about their original floor. The guide recounted the tragic tale of a painter who fell to his death down the elevator shaft long ago. My parents aren't prone to belief in the supernatural, but this experience defied logical explanation, leaving them deeply unsettled. What forces were at play in that hotel? The Quran states, and among its signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and your colors. Perhaps there are variations in reality we cannot fully comprehend. Did they glimpse a moment frozen in time, or encounter a restless spirit unable to move on? The mystery of the vanishing painter remains unresolved, haunting their memories to this day. The Uninvited Guest, by Jason McAllister. My cousin Nikki's late-night Skype call with his girlfriend Sam took a terrifying turn. It was around 1 a.m. on a Friday when Sam asked Nikki to come over. He declined, not wanting to make the drive so late. Their casual conversation continued, unaware of the horror about to unfold. Nikki noticed Sam's closet door open slightly behind her. He pointed it out, but they both brushed it off as nothing. The call went on for another half hour before the door creaked open wider. Nikki joked that her little brother must be hiding in there. Sam denied it, attributing the movement to a draft from an open window. As they chatted, the atmosphere in Sam's room grew heavy with unseen menace. 30 minutes later, the closet door swung fully open. A figure emerged, stepping out of the darkness and exiting Sam's bedroom. Nikki's blood ran cold at the sight. Sam remained oblivious to the intruder. "Your little brother was hiding in your closet," Nikki exclaimed, his voice tight with fear. Sam's response chilled him to the bone. She was home alone that night. Panic seized Nicky as the full horror of the situation hit him. He yelled at Sam to lock her door and call the police, promising to rush over immediately. Reality dawned on Sam as she turned to see her closet gaping open. A blood-curdling scream tore from her throat as she slammed and locked her bedroom door. Nicky sped to her house while dialing 911, his mind racing with terrifying possibilities. Who or what had been lurking in that closet? Arriving at Sam's house, Nicky found the front door ajar. He ran to her room, knocking frantically, but Sam wouldn't answer. When police finally broke down the door, they found her curled in a corner, catatonic with fear. Later, Sam revealed the most chilling detail of all. She had come face to face with the intruder at her doorway before slamming it shut. Who was the mysterious figure? How long had they been hiding in Sam's closet? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said none of you should stay alone in a house. Perhaps there was wisdom in those words beyond what we realize. The thought of an unseen presence watching, waiting in the shadows, continues to haunt us both. What sinister intentions did the intruder harbor? And most disturbingly, where did they go after leaving Sam's room? Face in the Storm by Tyler Westbrook. The thunderstorm raged outside my window, a symphony of nature's fury that I usually found comforting. Lightning illuminated the night sky as I finished watching Forrest Gump for the 100th time. At 2 a.m., I decided it was time for sleep, relishing the thought of drifting off to the sound of rain. My father was working the night shift, leaving me alone in the house. As I settled into bed, a sharp sound cut through the storm's cacophony. Something had struck my window. I dismissed it as debris carried by the wind, but seconds later it happened again, and again. The distinct sound of rocks hitting glass. My heart began to race as adrenaline surged through my body. It couldn't be my dad. He would have called if something was wrong. The impacts grew more frequent. I lay frozen in bed, torn between investigating and hiding under the covers. Whoever was outside surely knew I was awake. I had just turned off the TV, its glow visible through the window. I decided to ignore it, hoping they would give up and leave. But the barrage continued, growing faster and more insistent. The rain began to lighten, and a new sound reached my ears. The low rumble of a truck engine idling in the street below. A much louder thump against the window shattered my paralysis. I bolted out of bed, intending to call the police. As I raced down the stairs passing the front door, I saw something that stopped me cold. A face peered through the glass panel at the top of the door. A chilling smile played across their features as our eyes met. Terror gripped me as I sprinted to the kitchen and dialed 911. The operator assured me an officer was nearby. Suddenly, the intruder began rattling the doorknob, then ramming the door, trying to break in. I grabbed a knife, yelling that police were on their way before fleeing back upstairs. After a minute, the assault on the door ceased. I heard the truck drive away as sirens approached. When the officer arrived, I described the face as best I could, but I had no information about the vehicle. If only I had looked out the window. That regret still haunts me. Without more details, the police were never able to catch the perpetrators. What were their intentions? Robbery or something far worse? The Quran states and Allah knows what you conceal and what you reveal. But some mysteries remain hidden, even from us. Who were those people? Why did they target my house that night? The memory of that face smiling through the storm lingers, a reminder that danger can lurk just beyond our doors. What horrors might have unfolded if they had gained entry? The unanswered questions echo in the dark recesses of my mind, a chilling reminder of how quickly safety can shatter.